can start.
You can go ahead. All right, sounds good. Well, welcome everyone, and we're excited to have you all here with us from Dialogue to Action, aligning funding, advocacy, and partnerships for equitable outcomes. In this webinar today, we'll dive into how organizations and communities can share their turn goals into coordinated action and creating a more equitable future. So today on the agenda, we have, of course, the welcoming and framing, key takeaways that we had from webinars 1 and 2, get to meet the hosts here and the guest speakers as well, dialogue to action conversation, how folks are really putting their feet on the ground and making things work with what they have and really creating something beautiful out of it. We also have the audience Q&A and our closing and path forward. So just for Zoom participation guidelines, if you're having any difficulty in the chat, please let us know to ask any questions. Please use the Q&A feature that we have available. And of course, make sure if there's any complications, you can rejoin the webinar at any time if the webinar is still in progress. All right, so the purpose of this series that we created was to really think about how we want our community to really come together during these times, informing participants on federal policy and changing impacts for nonprofits and services, showcasing how organizations are adopting and adapting to this response in creative ways, laying the groundwork for ongoing cross-sector collaboration, fostering an opening dialogue and collective resilience, and of course, sharing how these changes are affecting communities with local examples, and we'll do that here today. Our hope has really been to help folks understand the landscape, to leave with, a clear picture of what has changed at the federal level and why it matters now. We had the opportunity in our first webinar to really understand that landscape and see how folks are navigating. Grasp local impacts, so connect the federal shifts to the real implications for funding programs and services. Within our second webinar, we spoke to some CDCs, revitalized CDC in Western Mass, Codman Square here in Boston. We also had a foundation, the Essex County Community Foundation, and we also had Green Roots, talking about, what is the impact and how are folks really being able to navigate that with their programming. And today we'll talk about really how to navigate and act. So walk away with practical next steps and know who and in what extent you want to work with them and how you want to expand that. So our key takeaways in thinking about, webinars 1 and 2 has been the federal volatility is creating real risk for equitable clean energy progress. These shifting priorities has really helped us understand how we can move forward. But also it's making us think about the communities that are really being affected, the marginalized community coming from low-income backgrounds and environmental justice communities, how folks are really being affected in that area. And for webinar 2, the trusted community-based organizations are the stabilizing force. We were able to see how folks are really able to take in what they have and, pivot and work together to create a really great solution. And the funders and state and local actors are creating, what we need, right, in preventing the widening of inequities. So the strategic investment and the flexible funding and the partnerships that are really coming from that. And so those, we were able to see within the first and second webinar, and now we really like to make sure that we can help you, give you some tools that will allow you to move forward. And so who are, the hosts here today? We have myself, Joanna DeCunha. I'm an environmental justice program manager at Resident Energy. We are a Boston solar company. We work mainly within nonprofits and affordable housing space to help bring clean access to communities. And I will hand it over to the other hosts as well to introduce themselves. Tristan or Esmeralda?
Hi, everybody. Tristan Thomas, Director of Policy with ACE, Alternatives for Community and Environment.
EJ nonprofit that's been around for over 30 years, based in the neighborhood of Roxbury. And yeah, we're proud to have co-hosted this webinar series. Thank you for your interest and engagement, and hope that you have some takeaways to bring back to your organization. Don't hesitate to reach out directly to me as well if you'd like to connect on any of the topics that have come up over the course of the series. Esmeralda?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Esmeralda Bisono. I'm with Emerald Cities Collaborative as the Northeast Community Engagement and Policy Manager. And similar to what my co-host said, thank you all for being here. And we hope that you've been able to take something helpful from this series. And we're always open to continue the conversation with you all. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. So the next, we will then move over to our guest speakers, and I will hand this over to Esmeralda.
Awesome, thank you. So, yeah, I'll introduce our first guest speaker and then they'll give their opening remarks. We have three guest speakers in total. So, Andrea Namiche is an organizing consultant at Community Labor United, where she convenes the Green Justice Coalition, a statewide alliance of labor and community organizations advancing transit, energy, and environmental justice. With 8 years bridging grassroots power building and system strategy, she previously co-led Neighbor to Neighbor Massachusetts and supported climate resilience and gender-focused programs at DAI Global. Andrea holds an MA from Tufts Fletcher School. So I'll pass it to you, Andrea.
Thanks, Esmeralda. Hi, everybody. Speaking here about Community Labor United and the Green Justice Coalition. So just to kick off of just a little bit of background as to CLU. CLU has been around for 20 years as of this year, started in 2005. And CLU's kind of mission and vision is really organizing coalitions that are anchored by both labor unions and community groups to build movement power to fight and win on issues that matter to the working class and people of color. And so historically, CLU has had a triple bottom line or a triple bottom win philosophy. So ensuring that all of our campaigns are winning on economic justice, environmental and climate justice, and equity. And I think Clue is different from some of the other guest speakers today and some of the past guest speakers during this session or during this series, because CLU really focuses on organizing coalitions. And why do we kind of focus on coalitional organizing, especially with CLU? Is that we're constantly trying to really overcome divisions between both labor and community when it comes to our environmental movement, and building collective power between community and labor to win on a shared future that is focused on clean energy. And again, that triple bottom win of EJ, economic justice and equity. So, CLU runs two kind of major coalitions. Today, I'll be focusing primarily on the Green Justice Coalition. And within GJC, there's also our Public Transit Public Good. And then the other coalition that CLU runs is Care That Works. So the Green Justice Coalition started way back in 2008, kind of reminiscent of, chaotic times that we're also living in now. But GJC kind of sprung out of, there was the economic recession that was happening federally. And federally, there was also a lot of stimulus package money that was coming through. And funds coming specifically to Massachusetts. And a lot of that funding, kind of similar to the IRA that we were seeing back in 2022, was some was focused around, getting people back to work and focus on energy future. And so the previous administration here in Massachusetts passed the Green Communities Act, which then eventually created the Massachusetts Energy Efficiency Program back in 2008. So historically, GJC's campaigns have focused really on, experimenting with community microgrids, getting community choice energy in Boston, which BCAN really led. And now it has really expanded to other cities and towns in Massachusetts, project labor agreements on new buildings and clean energy. And so just to give a sense of who our partners are on our community side, we have Boston Climate Action Network, New England Community Project, Chinese Progressive Association, Neighbor to Neighbor, Clean Water Action, and Alternatives for Community and Environment. And our labor partners are the Sheet Metal Workers Local 17, Greater Boston Building Trades, IBW 103, our Insulators Local 6, Building Pathways, and the Greater Boston Labor Council. So just wanted to touch on a little bit of the federal impacts. I know that we touched on them a little bit in the first series and in the second series, but wanting to share a little bit of the federal impacts that relate to both the community and labor side. So first, just touching on the Inflation Reduction Act and one of the large campaigns that GJC led back in 2024 around the project labor agreements here. So the IRA that was passed under the Biden administration was supposed to bring roughly 6 million in clean energy and transportation investments into Massachusetts. That was slated to create about 6,900 new jobs. And so, of course, with the new Trump administration, the IRA is no longer. So that's a lot of investment and jobs that have been taken away or put on pause for Massachusetts' clean energy future. And then the second thing is around the stop work orders that we have been seeing recently for wind in New England, and some of the impacts there on union jobs. And so kind of since the Trump administration retook office in January, the administration has really worked to dismantle offshore wind industry. So many of the executive orders have focused on stopping issuing new permits or stopping construction that is currently underway, or putting more kind of hurdles for the wind industry to bring up new projects here in New England. So just one key example is the Revolution Wind in Rhode Island that was under construction, but had a stop work order recently back in September. And our labor partners have really been pushing back on that and were able to the courts were able to bring that project back online for construction. But then there's a huge wind facility that was popping up in Salem called the Salem Port Harbor, which now has been canceled and put on hold, but had really strong, that was a project that had really strong both community and labor benefits agreements. So we're seeing the impacts on our clean energy future for Massachusetts, on the dismantling of unions and labor, and then also on communities being able to access clean energy that will have impacts on our health and environment, our utility bills, et cetera. But despite it all, community and labor are still organizing. And I think CLU and the GJC Coalition are really thinking that although we are battling a lot of federal things that are happening, it's still a good moment for us to be building deeper connections with our community partners as well as our labor unions, to kind of push back on an anti-union rhetoric nationally, an anti-clean energy rhetoric, and kind of the corporations that are coming about and stopping us from kind of advancing in clean energy. So just one major example is that Boston saw its first Labor Day parade this year in 2025. I know it's kind of wild that we've never had a parade here in Boston. We've always had Boston Labor Day breakfasts, but this year was our first parade under the kind of banner of Workers Over Billionaires. And so that parade brought over 10,000 people, the labor unions across Massachusetts, as well as the governor, the lieutenant governor, attorney general, and our Congress people down in Washington, including Markey and Warren, and Ayanna Pressley. And so kind of continuing on with GJC's work, our nearly 20-year history of working on energy justice and our triple win, is we are in the kind of starting stages around an energy modernization campaign. We know that yes, there's all these things that are happening federally that are causing roadblocks in how we move forward with clean energy, but there are also a ton of opportunities here in Massachusetts to start and regionally in New England to bring about a clean energy future that works for both workers and community. So our energy modernization campaign has really focused on community surveys as a base building tactic to get an understanding of how people relate to energy. And this is really serving to support us in grounding this energy campaign in the lived realities of people, as well as also working with our labor partners around what a just transition and energy modernization campaign can look like on the labor union side. And so I will kind of stop there and pass it on to the guest speakers and looking forward to questions.
All right, awesome. So I will introduce our next guest speaker, Hassan Faruqi. He's the Executive Director of the Boston Climate Action Network, BCAN, and he leads operations, policy advocacy, stakeholder engagement, and strategic planning. He co-coordinates the Boston Green New Deal Coalition and serves on the Green Justice Coalition Steering Committee. He has advised the MAPC Justice 40 Advisory Group and contributed to the White House's Opportunity Project Sprint. So I will pass it to Hassan for his opening remark. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of the folks who helped put this together, Emerald Cities Collaborative and Resonant Energy and ACE. It's really great to be here. So as you heard, I have the honor of running the Boston Climate Action Network, which is a community-based organization that's been around for about 25 years or so. We're residents of the city who are organizing and mobilizing around city and state level climate justice action. And for most of our history, we've been able to work hand in hand with partners like the members of the Green Justice Coalition, and as Andrea described, have gotten to pass tangible policies that have helped not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but solve so many of the day-to-day challenges that our residents face. From our standpoint, climate action is about housing and energy being more affordable for our residents. It's about creating good paying jobs and opportunities for small businesses. It's about transportation that's reliable and accessible, and it's about reducing traffic. But it's also about making sure that our health is improved, reducing air pollution and lowering the number of asthma attacks and lung cancer that too many of our residents continue to see thanks to the environmental issues that, of course, affect everyone. But we know that not everyone is starting in the same place. Those with the least social, political, and economic power are the ones who are hit first and worst by the effects of climate change. Those are the challenges that we have combated head on throughout the last years and decades. And in that process, have worked, of course, with the Green Justice Coalition for a long time, but also now get to co-convene, in addition, the Boston Green New Deal Coalition. And I get to serve as one of the co-chairs of that coalition. And that coalition actually includes many of the folks on this call, ACE and Resonant and Boston Community Solar Cooperative. But it's really started about 4 years ago after Mayor Wu was elected to be mayor of Boston. She ran on a vision of a Green New Deal for Boston, a vision that many of our members and organizations helped to inform and create when she was on the city council. And we saw that we had a really important opportunity to collaborate with our new administration to actually implement so many of these policies as the mayor was championing this whole of government approach to climate action. And that's the collaborative that I will be focusing on here today. The Green New Deal Coalition is a coalition of almost 50 different community-based organizations across the city of Boston. We don't even have time to name all of them today, but there are groups working on every issue from health to housing to transportation to food access to economic opportunities to, of course, my personal favorite, buildings and energy, because we understand climate change affects every one of our issues. It affects every one of our residents and every one of our neighborhoods. And so we have to get every one of our community groups in on this process as well. Many of you may be familiar with the Boston Green Ribbon Commission, which brings together businesses and institutions across the city. And it's really important. And it's an effective body in helping those groups to collaborate with city government. But we also know that what happens in our city is so much bigger and broader than just what's happening in our institutional and business communities. Residents and the community-based organizations that they're a part of are doing the work every day to support folks with all of our issues, housing and energy and transportation, and too often lack the direct lines of access to City Hall that our institutions and our business community have long enjoyed. The Green New Deal Coalition can change that. And that's what we've been doing for the last several years. And of course, you all remember, before last year, we had an influx of investments from the federal government on the issue of climate action. And we, as a coalition, worked hand in hand with City Hall to capture as much of this funding for issues happening here in Boston. This included funding that city government gets to administer to help run important programs like expanding electric school buses, which get to benefit so many of our kids. But it's also been funding that's gone directly back to community-based organizations, like the Codman Square Neighborhood Development Corporation, which is able to retrofit some of their affordable housing units to take out gas stoves and instead replace them with electric stoves. It improves their residents' health. It reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And these are projects that are game-changing, not just because they support our residents and improve their lives, but because they show city government can work hand in hand with community-based organizations in a way that's efficient and productive, and of course, that's led by the residents and the community groups that really have long been doing this work before any folks in city government were paying attention. And of course, we'll continue to do this work long after any particular elected officials are in office. Of course, today we're in a very different moment than we were even just a year ago when it comes to federal funding. And so many of our groups have lost funding that they had secured, painfully so. And so much of the future of making climate infrastructure a reality is uncertain. That's why we've been working long before this president was in office to figure out how we could continue making the financing and funding of the Green New Deal infrastructure a reality. And that's what we continue to focus on today with a greater level of urgency than ever. It's something that's brought together our whole coalition because everyone on every issue is harmed by what's happening in Washington. And as a result, everyone understands the importance of making sure we have financial sustainability for all of the work that we do. Our work is only as effective as it is scalable and replicable so that other cities can do the same, but also as much as it is fundable. If we can't figure out how to pay for it, and especially making sure the right people pay for it and the right people don't, then we're not going to get this done. And what I mean by that is we certainly cannot just do all of this infrastructure and then raise the energy bills or the rent or the taxes of the residents in our city who are already struggling to make it as it is. We have to instead find different ways that we can make this happen at scale while making sure that costs go down for working families, not up. And I know we can get this done because we're doing it. Andrea mentioned community choice electricity, one of my favorite programs. Here, the city gets to purchase energy on behalf of residents and sell it back to them at a lower rate. So residents can get a discount on their energy. Residents have saved anywhere between $200 to $700 a year, which amounts to just over $250 million in just 4 years. Now, this is great. Families like saving money, but it's also made the city of Boston one of the largest purchasers of renewable energy in all of New England. That is what's possible when we can pool our resources together and have city government work quickly and aggressively and creatively to make our residents' lives better. In that way, we're able to fund more renewable energy while costs for families go down. And models like that are exactly what we want to do more of as these years go on. Now, in closing, you might be wondering, what can people do? What can community organizations do to sustain this action and to strengthen all of these ecosystems? Get involved. Simply put, all of us are only as powerful as we are organized. And so even if you're not involved with a community-based organization, or if there aren't ones in your area, first of all, you can start them. But second of all, getting to know your neighbors, getting to work hand in hand with people that you work with in your workplace, people that you may go to church with, or folks who maybe send their kids to your kids' school as well, are exactly the people that only you can reach. And it is through those relationships with the people around us that we at BCAN have been able to make anything happen in the last 25 years. We're not a group that has a whole army of lawyers and lobbyists. We're certainly not a group that has millions and millions of dollars to give to politicians' campaign accounts. We're a group that has brought together regular people, because when regular residents have gotten in the fight, when people from all backgrounds and all neighborhoods have understood that climate action done right isn't just about greenhouse gas emissions, but also a way to make their lives better here today, that's when the whole world becomes possible. And that's what we need to keep doing here in Boston and everywhere if we have any hope of addressing the many crises that we face today. A changing climate and rising sea levels, rising temperatures, but also rising rent and rising energy bills. And too many people who are out of work or who are in jobs that are not paying them enough to begin with. All of these challenges and more can be solved when we get in the fight, when we get organized, and we get mobilized, and we make our society work for us. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hassan. All right, next I'll introduce our last guest speaker, Beth Griffith. She is the founder of Renewable Renegades and a licensed green infrastructure professional. She delivers culturally competent workforce training, technical assistance, and business development to grow clean energy careers and inclusive enterprises, especially in BIPOC communities. A certified building analyst professional and home improvement contractor, Beth has trained over 140 participants and mentored over 1,000 people, opening pathways to sustainability and economic mobility. Beth is a partner and advisor for the Boston Community Solar Co-op. I'll pass it to you, Beth.
Thank you so much, Esmeralda, for that wonderful introduction. And I just want to say great presentations, Hassan and Andrea. So, my name is Beth Griffith. What actually started me in the renewable energy movement was my 8-year-old daughter in the third grade actually showing great leadership skills and saying, Mom, I learned about recycling in school, Boston Public Schools, big up Boston Public Schools, and we have to recycle. Yeah, I'm telling on myself, I didn't recycle before that. And she actually got me into recycling, learning more about renewable energy and climate change. And she was also adversely affected by asthma, which is really due to pollution, so much pollen in the cities. And so that really made me want to get involved, make a difference, and make a change. And so my presentation is going to be talking about how organizations such as yours can build power, not just electrical, but collective action, partnerships, collaboration, and community-driven solutions. And so I was thinking of something, a name to name my presentation. I always love to have a theme. And one of my favorite songs right now that I love, especially when I might not get the best news, is, stepping is really popular. South Carolina is being represented. And I don't like what's going on with the federal government cutting our funding, a lot of policies, food aid, health insurance, so many different things. And so I decided to name my presentation, We Don't Like It, but We're Gonna Keep on Stepping. So how many of you all does that resonate with you? You can either raise your hand or put yes in the chat, please. And thank you. And the biggest takeaway I have from this slide is we're not stopping, we're not retreating, we're adapting, we're innovating, and we're building something more resilient than what came before. When one door closes, we're not just finding windows, we're creating entirely new pathways forward. And I've already been doing this already, and a lot of my participants on this webinar have. Like my colleague Hassan and Tristan, it's just wonderful to just be in this space. And Also going to be talking about how to address some of the lacks of funding and what we can do, especially, I like to say if you want to, there's an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go by yourself. But if you want to go far, go together. It's one of my favorite quotes that usually I always bring up in a presentation or where I'm speaking because it just resonates with me totally and truly. And so, one of the ways that we can collaborate and partner with each other is Boston. What are we famous for? We're famous for our colleges and universities. We're famous for our healthcare systems, Leahy, Mass General Brigham, Beth Israel, and our community health centers. And we're also known for our cultural institutions, such as the MFA. Isabella Gardner Stewart Museum. And a lot of these organizations, even our theaters, our opera houses, with the Boston Green New Ribbon Commission, they're all working on decarbonization. They have a lot of funding, a lot of endowment. They actually have a decent amount of capital to invest in reducing their carbon footprint. And also, too, educating our students, educating our workforce, and they also give back a lot to the communities as well. And so, I say size doesn't matter when you're part of something bigger. Boston Community Solar Cooperative, we've been in talks with Boston Medical Center. We've talked to the city. We are willing to talk to just about anyone and everyone when it comes to joining forces. And that's something that's really important because when you pull your resource together, you can do more things together. And I'll just talk a little bit about one of the collaborations, the powerful collaborations with my organization, Boston Community Solar Cooperative, ACE, Alternatives for Community and Environment, and Co-Everything. And so we're located in Boston, Massachusetts. We're providing renewable energy for the Dorchester Food Cooperative. And we noticed, especially since this funding cut, we're just having some issues when it comes to our business development. And so I actually met with Tristan. I kind of had a virtual one-on-one with him when he was still a part of BECMA. And we started just to get to know each other professionally. Now Tristan moved on to a wonderful organization, ACE, and he was in, the renewable energy space in both organizations. And then also my colleague, Greg King, I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with him as well, too. You know of him. He actually met Tristan as well. And we said, you know what? What can we do? What can we do to potentially collaborate with each other? And so now ACE is actually helping us with our business development side. And so also isn't Co-Everything when it comes to community outreach, out churches, organizations, nonprofits, and environmental justice communities. And so they're advocating for us, they're representing us, and we are also spreading the word about the great work that they're doing. And that's something that's really powerful because the more people you have talking about your organization, the greater the impact you can have. And so relationships are something that's really important to me, and relationships matter, and they matter more than ever in this climate. And also with our new SMART program 3.0, it's kind of like it requires you to actually build more relationships with the community. There are organizations like Power Options in 3 degrees that help smaller organizations like ours access deals that would have been previously out of reach, cross-sector coalitions. This is where I really feel like Labor, CLU, Community Labor United, that's a great organization. We have to learn how to work together, how to form coalitions. And also, I would like to say, think about public-private partnerships as well. The state has done things to try to step in to kind of help with a lot of funding that's been lost from the Green New Deal, hasn't replaced it totally yet. However, they're working on it. And another thing I would say, look at your nonprofits and organizations in your industry. And ECEC PSEF is a wonderful organization. I don't know how many of you all are familiar with it. NC, as I call it, very wonderful organization that's doing a lot of great work in the community. And labor. One thing I will say, and I guess I'll do a quick disclaimer. I'm not a nonprofit organization, but I know a lot of you are. And most of the time, you're not supposed to have any political views. But I just have to say, everything is political, funding, everything, the seatbelt, the air you breathe, how clean it is, how clean your water, everything is related to politics and policies. And we have to keep on stepping, whether it's getting our neighbors involved, getting some of our union members that voted against their own interests. We have to call that out, and we have to be willing to call and the leadership has to be willing to also call that out as well. We have to organize, we have to strategize, and we really have to keep on stepping. There's also Mass CEC, DOER, and also learn how to pivot because now the state is actually emphasizing agrivoltaic ventures as well too. They're actually rewarding you more for that. So don't be afraid to pivot. And if you're trying something new, don't be afraid. If you are learning and trying something new, fail fast, as I like to say. Always make sure you fail fast if you're trying something new. And outside the box strategies that work, leveraging unused spaces, especially when it comes to solar and wind with a public-private partnership and also with funding, cross-sector consortia, and use technology to actually aid you and help. And like I said, relationships matter. That's also one of the biggest takeaways that I have as well. And that's basically it. If you want to connect, if you want to build together, if you want to get into good trouble together and advocate, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And also check out these wonderful organizations like NC, Mass CEC, PSEF, all these great organizations. They're here for you. And thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Beth. All right, we are super excited to talk with all three of you, get into some questions. And as a reminder for the audience, please use the Q&A box if you have any questions for our panelists. I will now pass it to Tristan for the moderated panel.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Again, Tristan Thomas, Director of Policy with ACE. Thank you so much for being part of this series. And we'll just dive right in. What is one commitment or action that you all hope participants can take after this webinar? How can they tap in with the work that your organizations and coalitions are doing? Are there specific campaigns, specific near and short-term action items? How can people get involved? Maybe we can start with Hassan.
Sure. Well, if you live in Boston, you can join the Boston Climate Action Network as a volunteer, and that can help you get involved with knowing what's going on and being able to take action in our campaign, which is really focused on energy infrastructure. So we can make sure that we build clean energy and that it is working in coordination with what we need as residents, what workers need, and that we can make sure it gets done uh, in an affordable way so that we're not driving up people's bills as a result. But regardless of where you live, if you live outside the city as well, we have so many municipal elections coming up just next week. And what we have always been about here at BCAN is that city government really has so much power to deliver on the issues of climate and housing and of economic prosperity. So I would say the actions that people can take are, if you're able to, register to vote, make sure that you get to the polls, but also to bring other people that you know. Each of us have people that only we can reach and who are not going to be hearing from political campaigns elsewhere. They're not going to be paying attention to even what I'm saying, but they are listening to you. And that's where you have such a powerful role in making sure that what's happening in our city and town governments reflect what all of us need.
Thank you. So I heard volunteer with BCAN, and maybe we could drop a link in the chat for people to be able to do that, and then register to vote and make sure you're connecting with your neighbors and only the folks that you can reach. Um, Andrea, can you tell us about ways folks can get involved with Green Justice Coalition, Community Labor United, and other efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tristan. I think similarly to Hassan, definitely joining your local base building organization. And I think we have a lot of partners within GJC whose focus is on base building, whether it's Boston Climate Action Network, ACE, Neighbor to Neighbor, which is statewide outside of Boston, which I want to kind of like lift up as, the issues that we face are definitely in where our neighborhoods are. Not everybody lives in the city of Boston. So touch base with other base building organizations that are statewide. And then I think the other thing is that joining those base building organizations really allow your voices to come through, especially both within the orgs in terms of the campaigns that they run as individual organizations, but also within GJC. All the campaigns that GJC has done historically over 20 years or close to 20 years has been rooted in what people are facing. And GJC focuses on trying to not only bring changes to the city of Boston, but because we have some partners that are statewide, really trying to make statewide changes to a lot of the energy and even public transit issues that we're facing in Boston and across the state. So I would say, very much get involved with your local organization. They may be a partner, whether it's with GJC or the Boston Green New Deal or other broader coalitions where you can bring in more people power to really win on issues that you care about.
Thank you, Andrea. And I'm gonna push you a little bit further to be more specific and correct me if I'm wrong. But right now, one of the major policy issues that Green Justice Coalition and many others in the state are tracking are the new state regulations around siting and permitting of clean energy infrastructure. This is a new process that was established by advocacy in the 2024 climate law, and it outlines a number of important provisions as it relates to community engagement and community benefits, as it relates to site suitability and where it's considered a good area to put a new clean energy project and under what conditions. And so this is a really critical process for communities to have a voice at the table. And I know that Green Justice Coalition is working on some comment letters. Is there a way for folks to be able to tap into sign on to those letters and to see firsthand some of the specific issues that we're advocating around?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely reaching out to me about sign-on letters. But yeah, Tristan, I think you're totally right. There's so many state-wide regulations that people don't know are happening sometimes. And so I mean, I think this also dovetails into getting involved with an organization that is also tracking it. But yeah, we have been really closely focusing on these regulations because it really sets the stage for Massachusetts in terms of how we meet our clean energy climate action plan. So, you know, there are benchmarks for 2030 and there are benchmarks for 2050, and a lot of the new infrastructure that we will need, whether it's wind or solar or batteries or, you know, it all the clean energy facilities that we will need to get us to those benchmarks, and what the community benefits look like when those projects are happening in communities are being decided right now, in terms of these proposed regulations. So absolutely, Tristan, I think, you know, getting people to join us in our sign-on letters so that we're telling the state exactly, you know, what we need from these regulations that ensure that as we build this kind of, you know, clean energy future, and meeting our climate goals, that we're also ensuring that we're not replicating past harms of past industrial and energy innovations that have happened in the past, but we are really building a clean energy future that is equitable, and that meets the needs of both Bostonians and people all across the state.
Thank you. I appreciate you diving into that. And I also hopefully want to share just other comment letters related to the siting and permitting process that the EJ table and Mass Power Forward have helped prepare. And so, folks, if you're interested, please sign on to that as well. Um, Beth, how can folks get involved with Boston Community Solar Cooperative and contribute to building cleaner, less emissions, and sharing economic benefits in our communities? How can folks tap in to the solar co-op's work?
So I would say the easiest way to get involved is to go to our website. I will put it in the chat and just sign up for our newsletter. We don't spam you. We usually send it out once a month. And also, if you know of a potential solar site, we do have a space there where you could put your information in, and we also do give referral bonuses if a project pans out. And that's another thing. I will also say there's a lot of, if you go to your local grocery store or anything in public, I know this hasn't to do with the question you just asked, but we're trying to get enough signatures for rent control on the ballot. Affordable housing is so important. Also, when it comes to, and environmental justice. So I just wanted to mention that as well too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate each of you sharing ways folks can get involved today and reach out to each of our organizations and tap into different advocacy efforts and share your perspectives to inform the work of various space building organizations. Um, I'm thinking about what are ways that folks can plan to get involved in 2026. So looking ahead, what are some of the long-term plans and visions of your organizations and groups, and how might the audience fit into that? And I'll throw that to whoever would like to go first. And if not, maybe I can circle back and call on you, Hassan.
Sounds good. Yes. So, like I mentioned, we're getting more and more involved with these energy infrastructure projects, and some of them are already happening in our neighborhoods, but many more will continue to happen. And so, if you live in Boston, and certainly this is true if you live outside of Boston as well, pay attention to what's happening in your neighborhood. And some of the things that we're going to be thinking about as time goes on is how we can get more residents involved in these processes. But of course, another thing that we all are feeling are energy bills that continue to rise year after year after year. And today we're excited to announce our biggest step yet in being able to reduce people's energy bills, which is our new energy navigation program. And this helps support people in accessing existing programs like Boston Community Choice Electricity and Mass Save and a whole litany of others. And will actually support people in going through the entire process. anyone who's used Mass Save knows there are so many hoops that you have to jump through, so many parts of the process, and people often get lost in that process. But before we even get there, so many folks don't know about these programs. They don't trust the programs because of the long history of scams like third-party suppliers that have harmed residents. And so we want to make sure that people can hear about these programs and get the access they need because with issues like Mass Save, all of us pay in to these programs on our energy bill. But in Boston, Boston residents pay more into the program than we actually get out of it. Too many of our residents never get access, and we want to change that. So if you are a resident, first of all, you should come to us and we can help you get access to these programs. But we're also going to have ways that residents can become energy ambassadors to support all of the folks in your life, your friends, your neighbors, in at least knowing about these programs. You don't have to become a technical expert or know all the ins and outs of every program, but knowing about the programs, knowing what they can do, and being able to share those with folks in your life makes a world of difference. Because, as I said before, all of us have people that only we can reach, who are not going to be reached by seeing a billboard for Mass Save on the bus stop. And that's exactly what we're going to help train and equip people to do through this new program. So in 2026, come back to us and we'll help you make that happen.
Thank you. Andrea or Beth, anything forward-looking in 2026 in terms of vision and priorities and perhaps ways folks can be involved?
So I would say the vision is we will be able to actually start our workforce development program once we get started on installing the Dorchester Food Cooperative, especially with so many people in tech out of the workforce. So just retraining and upskilling people, especially people from EJ communities and BIPOC individuals, that's where I see our vision. And honestly, just advocating, like I'm just gonna pick up on what Hassan said. This Mass Save program, I don't think we needed another study to realize that the people that need help the most are not getting it. I believe Worcester, our second busiest city, is getting, excuse my English or French, is getting screwed the most. They're paying over $17 million into this program that Worcester residents did not benefit from. And that is just egregious. It's disastrous. We really need to stay on our legislators and hold them accountable about really letting these dollars, everybody pays a bill. Whether you're renting a homeowner, somehow you're paying for it. And people aren't able to access those dollars. It's only really mostly accessible to only affluent people, mostly affluent communities. And another thing too is I also want to highlight the work that Action for Equity is doing. There's also a bill on the House right in on the state House right now in Beacon Hill with quarry reform, because it happened to me when I went to go get my building analyst professional certification. We had two people in that class that had a quarry. And when they go get a job, sometimes they'll get hired by the energy companies, and on a second or third day, they're fired because they have a quarry. And the quarry for these private companies is actually stricter than it is for the state. So we also need to call our legislators and advocate for quarry reform so people in EJ communities and people that if they wrote a bad check, this could adversely affect them. They could be fired by these utility companies. And everyone pays in, but also everyone doesn't get to benefit because these are really good paying jobs that can transform people's lives and help to stave off the gentrification that's happening in our communities. So we're also going to be working and advocating for that as well too.
Yeah, I think in terms of GJC, I think a lot of the plans will be launching this energy modernization and energy justice campaign. Going through we had a great meeting on Monday where we kind of like put some things on the wall of some ideas, but I think we are entering into another winter. We're entering into another season where people are, really going to have to be both paying energy bills or, rationing electricity because they spend so much over the summer using AC during the hot days. And then, how are people going to manage in the winter as well? So I think just for us, it's really coming together as the Green Justice Coalition, being rooted in what we're hearing from community members, and also being aligned and attuned with what's happening across our state to think through an energy justice campaign that really hits at the needs of community and brings about economic justice and our economic, EJ, and equity. And then I think the other thing is just wanting to do more popular education workshops. I think that there are so many people that are probably on this call that had no idea about siting and permitting, maybe either because you're not plugged into one of these organizations or whatever it may be, or don't know how to access mass saves, or don't know that the state has this clean energy and climate plan that, sets targets for 2030 and 2025, and how all of that relates to us being ratepayers and residents of the Commonwealth. So I think just more popular education workshops that really get people familiar and know what our energy system in Massachusetts consists of. So those are some budding plans for the new year.
Thank you for sharing. As we approach the last few minutes of this panel, just a reminder, if folks have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll try to address them right away. Um, Now I'll ask, we talked a little bit about ways that folks can come in and get involved with existing work, add their support. Where do we see gaps in our ecosystem? Are there issues that aren't being addressed that we need more people in orgs to be paying attention to? And alternatively, are there ways that our organizations or coalitions have gaps or assistance needs? And are there ways that the audience can help us, whether that's, marketing or hosting workshops or community engagement, or where are the gaps in the ecosystem broadly and where are the gaps within our coalitions or organizations, and how can we connect the dots to get them filled? Um, might I be able to put you on the spot, Beth, to maybe start us off?
So, some gaps. Honestly, I would say funding, but I think everyone would probably agree with that. One thing I will say, let's look at a different way of potentially doing things. Crowdfunding can address those gaps. Also, a lot of corporations will actually match. You can do some research, will actually match funds up to a certain amount for donations. That's another thing. And crowdfunding, because sometimes we just have to save ourselves, SOS. And so if you just happen to run into a campaign, especially focusing on renewable energy, I've done it before. I've invested in renewable energy projects on crowdfunding platforms. It's really, I would say, more important than ever to just make sure that we cycle our dollars, especially towards our causes, put our money where our mouth is. And that's what I would say. Also, labor has a decent amount of money in their coffers, and they really need to invest in Black and Brown owned media, and also I actually feel they really need to invest more in these organizations that are working with EJ populations and minority populations. Because if we're going to turn things around, we really need to be getting, and especially voting organizations, these are gaps. We really need to be getting out 60 to 70, 80% of our eligible voters and phone banking, because we need to hold our legislators accountable. I'm just going to be honest. I'm a straight shooter. I've pissed a few people off. I really don't care. But they could be a little bit lazy. They need to be more productive and they need to be doing more to, that's what government's supposed to be, to help the most vulnerable, to help the people. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Hassan or Andrea, what are the gaps in our ecosystems and our organizations?
I agree completely with Beth. I think, the funding thing is important. I mentioned this in the opening remarks. It's not just about the funding for the actual infrastructure that we're trying to build, whether it's energy or building retrofits or improving transportation, but it is also in the gap of funding the community-based organizations who are doing the work to get residents access to that. And that's a place where regular folks can actually make a difference. Your 10 or 20 or $50 makes a world of difference for community-based organizations like BCAN and so many of the other ones here, who don't have, huge balance sheets the way that some of these larger institutions do. And being able to hire even one more staff member can be transformative for groups who are doing work and getting residents connected to energy programs, for example. Um, the second gap is, as Beth said, the gap of leadership in state and local governments. And in some places, we have leaders who are doing great work, and it's really refreshing to see that. But in other cases, the gaps that we mentioned around funding can be closed. It's not like we don't have money in Massachusetts, but it's just a matter of what our priorities are in investing those in the right places. And our legislature has a really great opportunity this session to step up and invest in the kind of infrastructure that we need to make sure people can get to work on time through good public transit, to make sure that people have affordable energy through new clean energy investments, and to put an end to some of the harm that we've seen for years and decades with predatory companies who we have known about for a long time. And it is an opportunity the legislature has this session to put an end to that harm. And finally, on the topic of media, there is too often a gap of good, reliable, and accurate information that residents are getting about a world of topics. But too often, when folks are getting information from so many different sources on the internet, on social media, too many of those sources are not accurate. They're not doing the right fact finding, and in some cases, are actively trying to spread disinformation on purpose. It then is no surprise that folks have wildly different views about some basic facts that we deal with, climate change being among them. And so it is important that we bolster our local news institutions and make sure that we are serving as trusted sources for the people around us to make sure that they are also able to tell fact from fiction. And finally, I would say a gap is in people's own belief that this can happen. There is a gap of hope, a gap of determination. And I get it because so many folks have worked so tirelessly to make change happen and then have seen that very change fall by the wayside. But I think often about our own members who have done this work for decades, who have seen important policies that they helped pass in the 60s and 70s get completely gutted, and yet they continue to show up inspired by the belief that they can continue to make a difference. And that is what everyone needs to take to heart, particularly those of us who weren't around in the 60s and 70s. We need to make sure that we continue doing the work of organizing, because that is the only pathway for us to make progress in all the issues we've talked about.
Yeah, honestly, I think Beth and Hassan really laid out a lot of the things that were on my mind. Probably the only other thing that I would add, which it could be a gap, but also I see as a really big opportunity, is just better integration and alignment with all of the various tables and coalitions and initiatives that we're leading. I think it's definitely important for all of us to be touching on issues, but how can we also be building an intersectional movement, right, around what we care about? And so I think it's a gap because in some ways, I think a lot of us are being cross-sectoral and cross-coalition, et cetera. And I think it's a big opportunity, especially in the moment where we're in, where new and different people are being galvanized in this moment because of everything that's happening federally. So how can we also be bringing in those folks, engaging in popular education, engaging in learning, so that we're building a large movement to win on a lot of our issues. So more of a opportunity lens, and we're working on it. We're working on being intersectional and connecting our coalitions, but we can definitely do more of that, and yeah, build a broader coalition to fight back on a lot of things happening federally and kind of building resiliency here in Massachusetts as well.
Well, I appreciate you all. We're technically at time for this panel, but we did get one final question from the audience, and I'm hoping you can give maybe 20-second answer. Um, what is giving you hope slash keeping you going?
I would say the upsets, like the wonderful upsets, like Mom Donnie running for office, and my mentors. I'm going to show my age, but Mel King, who's an ancestor now, Makia Baker Gomez, who's an ancestor now, and Roland Martin, actually. I've learned a lot about organizing politically and advocacy through him and other grassroots organizations locally.
Thank you. Hassan?
What's giving me hope is all of our members, the regular residents who are showing up, carving out an hour or 2 hours out of their week, and on top of raising families and working multiple jobs in some cases, to participate in making their community better. That's one of the most inspiring things, and it's really an honor to be able to support them.
Yeah, seconded. What keeps me going? I'm an organizer by started my career with Neighbor to Neighbor. So definitely just continuing to talk with people, getting people engaged and energized. So doing, the grassroots organizing and the base building definitely still keeps me going. And then just on a personal note, I love cooking. So personally, that is also what keeps me going, is just having some things outside of the work, because burnout can be real, tiredness can be real, but just opportunities where I can just cook or go for a walk and kind of recenter for the long run.
Well, thank you so very much to each of our panelists for sharing your insights, opportunities to engage. There are lots of tangible ways that folks that are on this call can take action steps, both small and large, to support our collective priorities. So thank you once again, and I'll now turn it over to Esmeralda to close out our series.
Awesome. Yes, thank you all so much to our speakers for all three webinars, for joining us and sharing your insights and really helpful resources and just being in community together. Thank you to Tristan and Joanna for co-hosting, and everyone in our organizations in the background that helped with tech and planning and promoting and things like that. It's been really great, and thank you to everyone for joining today and joining our other two webinars in the series. This was our final webinar in the series, so we were really grateful and happy to see that everyone was joining. So yeah, next steps, we'll be sharing the recordings and the resources shortly from all three webinars. And of course, we welcome any follow-up conversations, any feedback with any of you who want to explore collaboration or support the work that we all do. So yeah, on behalf of Emerald Cities, ACE, Resident Energy, all of the guest speakers, again, thank you for showing up, for your commitment, and for continuing to advance equitable clean energy in our communities. Thanks everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.